Last week, we started a brand new series called The Heart of David. How many here have heard of David before? He's a character in the Bible. He's one of the most famous characters in the Bible, and I absolutely love David. David is one of my favorite characters in the Bible, and not just because he has some small story. He has 3 entire books and then a bunch of songs that he wrote, almost all the Psalms, and we know so much about him. The intimate nature of his heart for God, how he lived, how he led as a king, different things that happened to him in different stages of his life, when he was young, when he was an adult, when he got older. And we see all of these things and all the wonderful things that King David did and all of the terrible things that he did as well. And we get to learn from him. But at the end of the day, it says that David was a man after God's own heart. He was a man after God's own heart. And so we're going to take the next few weeks and we're going to examine the heart of David. What made David and his heart so special? Why is it that God handpicked him out of every person in all of Israel to become the leader and the king of his nation? We see in 1 Samuel, it talks about who David is and how his heart of worship began even as a small child. And I am a worship leader, as you just saw. I love leading worship. I love leading people into music, into the presence of God. But I wasn't always. I didn't even start playing guitar until I was in university. And believe it or not, I was in a heavy metal band in high school. And I wrote heavy music, but it was for God. And then I said, I want to play guitar and I want to be able to worship. And so I've turned songwriting into worship leading. And God has blessed that. But over the years, I've been leading worship for probably 10 plus years now, and I've had some what we might call worship fails. And maybe you've seen online there are these videos of worship fails, and I saw one where the guy was playing drums and a tree fell on his drum cage, and he just didn't know what to do. And things happen in the middle of our music set sometimes. And I want to share a couple worship fails that happened to me. I remember it was my very first year ever in Egypt. And they said, here's this American, he's a minister, and he's going to play a worship song for us. And they said, oh, this is going to be incredible. America has so many incredible musicians. And so I went up with my guitar, and I said, you have a plug, right? I can plug in. I didn't have time to practice. We didn't do any sound check. I said, yes, of course. So I plugged in my guitar. But the cable was a little bit loose, so it was it was making this noise the whole time and cutting in and out, and I'm starting to play, and the guy that was at the church, he said, oh, I know this song, and I was singing How Great Is Our God, but I was singing it in A, and he was playing it in I don't know what key, but it was not in the key of A. And so he's playing, and maybe it's the right chords in his key, but not in my key. And so we have this guitar going, and he's in the wrong key, and it sounds terrible. Terrible. And eventually, I just kept playing. I said, okay, Lord, you can hopefully salvage this train wreck. I don't know if you could save it or not, but I'm just going to keep going. So I just closed my eyes, and I kept playing. And eventually, the keyboard player figured out, oh, this is not the right key. And then he found the right key. And eventually, the guitar cable stopped loose, and it was fine. And the second half of the song was perfect. But the beginning was terrible. Maybe you guys were here a few weeks ago, and we were singing a song, and we were at the last song. You guys may have been here for this. We were singing What a Beautiful Name. It was an incredible song. I love this song so much. And we got to the bridge song, There is no rival, you have no equal. And it's just powerful. And we're building up, and all of a sudden, we hear this kid's dance music start coming out of the speaker. Who remembers that? Yes. We found out, we had no idea what was going on. Emmanuel is looking around, what is happening? Pastor Tim we don't know. Found out that Pastor Brooke next door had trying to connect to her speaker, accidentally connected to Bluetooth on one of these speakers, and she's like, where's the music? And we're like, we found the music, it's here, it's with us. It eventually stopped, and we kept going, and we praised, and we worshiped. Why do I share that? Because worship is more than music. Music is important, and yes, music helps to create an atmosphere and an environment where our hearts can soften and open to the presence of God. But music is not worship. Music can be an expression that we use to worship God, but worship is so much more than just music. And David's heart of worship went far beyond music, although he also worshiped with music. So today we're going to talk about David's heart of worship. David's heart of worship. 1 Samuel chapter 16, starting in verse 14, it says, "Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him." Remember, the Spirit of the Lord left Saul. He was supposed to be the king of Israel, but he disobeyed God. And God said, "I'm going to find somebody after my own heart." And he picked David. Now, Saul didn't know this. Remember last week, if you were here, we talked about David's heart of valor and how he slayed the giant, and he had this courage that defied the understanding of men because the Spirit of God was on him. Now, the anointing of the king was on David, but David was not yet king, and Saul did not know that David was the one. And this is where we pick up in verse 14 of 1 Samuel 16. "Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. Saul's attendant said to him, 'See, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command his servants here to search for someone who can play the lyre.'" That's an instrument. "He will play when the evil spirit from God comes on you, and you will feel better." So Saul said to his attendants, "Find someone who plays well and bring him to me." One of the servants answered, "I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. He is a brave man and a warrior. He speaks well and is a fine-looking man, and the Lord is with him." Then Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, "Send me your son David, who is with the sheep." So Jesse took a donkey, loaded it with bread, a skin of wine, and a young goat, and sent him with his son David to Saul. David came to Saul, and he entered his service. Saul liked him very much, and David became one of his armor bearers. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, saying, "Allow David to remain in my service, for I am pleased with him." Whenever the Spirit from God came on Saul, David would take up his lyre and play. Then relief would come to Saul, and he would feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. So Saul was being tormented by this evil spirit, and David had something about the way that he played his music that was peaceful. It brought the presence of God because he used his instrument to worship. And as he worshiped God, there was something that changed the atmosphere. He entered to the room of that palace where there was an evil spirit tormenting the king, and he began to play. And he began to worship God. And as he played his instrument, the evil spirit would leave. The evil spirit left at just the sound of a heart of worship being lifted up to their heavenly king. David had that heart of worship in him before he was ever given anything in the kingdom. And God looked at that and he said, "That's the heart that I want. That's the heart that I need in order to be a leader in this kingdom. It needs to be somebody that desires to worship me, that will learn how to play an instrument so that they can worship me with their skill." David had a heart of worship. How many have ever read through the Bible chronologically? It's kind of a fun challenge. If you haven't, it's fun. Yeah, a few of you have. Okay. So not all of the Bible is in chronological order, meaning sequential, historical order. And some things happened here, but they're in the Bible here. And so if you read in chronological order, sometimes you will read in the middle of Samuel, there will be a psalm, and then there will be chronicles. So David's life is recorded in 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and his songs are written in the book of Psalms. And sometimes you get to read a psalm in the middle of what the story is happening in David's life. And it's really, really cool when you read the Bible in such a way. Let's take an example. We saw last week, David slayed the giant, and eventually Saul got bitter with him. And he said, this man is going to come after me. He's going to take my kingdom. And he started to chase him. He started to hunt him. Well, you know what? When David was on the run from Saul, he began to write worship songs to God. And we have one of those. We have a couple of them actually in the Psalms. One of them is Psalm 57. And we're going to read that. And think of this, the story. David is on the run. He's supposed to be king. But instead, he's being hunted down like a dog for his life. He could be bitter with God. He could be mad. He could start to question. He could say, why in the world would you give me this promise only to break it? I'm not the king. They're trying to kill me. That's not the heart of David. The heart of David was a heart of trust and worship, saying that he is going to trust God. This is his words, the words of David. It says in Psalm 57, for the director of music to the tune of Do Not Destroy of David, a miktam, I guess that's a type of song, when he had fled from Saul into a cave. This is when David is inside of a cave, being hunted for his life. This is what he says in verse 1. Have mercy on me, my God, have mercy on me, for in you I take refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed. I cry out to God Most High, to God who vindicates me. He sends from heaven and saves me, rebuking those who hotly pursue me. God sends forth his love and his faithfulness. Verse 4, I am in the midst of lions. I am forced to dwell among ravenous beasts, men whose teeth are spears and arrows, and whose tongues are like sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. They spread a net for my feet. I was bowed down in distress, and they dug a pit in my path. But they have fallen into it themselves. My heart, O God, is steadfast. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music. Verse 8, awake my soul, awake harp and lyre. I will awake in the dawn. I will praise you, Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. For great is your love, reaching to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens, and let your glory be over all the earth. Isn't that a beautiful song? This is a song that he wrote and would sing. And at the beginning, he's saying, I'm in a hard place. I need you, God. He's crying out for help. He's crying out for the mercy of God. And then he's turning it back and he's saying, whatever happens, God, you are in control. You are the one that is worthy of everything. You are in control of the heavens and the earth. There was something in this heart of David that compelled him to worship no matter what the circumstance was. Even in the most difficult place, he said, God, you're worthy. God, the glory is yours. He could be bitter. He could have turned and said, no, I've had enough. This is not it. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what God promised. He can't see it with his eyes. But David had a heart of faith. And his heart of worship kept him connected to God so that he could trust him for the things he couldn't see with his own eyes. David eventually becomes king, as we know, and he overcomes his enemies, and Saul and his family eventually pass away, and God brings justice. And David becomes the king over all of Israel. And he does many things as king of Israel, but his heart of worship never changes. His heart of worship stays the same as that shepherd boy who would play that instrument out in the fields with the sheep. There's a moment where the Ark of the Covenant, how many remember the Ark of the Covenant? This was where the holy presence of God would dwell since the time of Moses. And it was with them, it was with the Israelites. But it had left Jerusalem, the holy city, and It was supposed to come back. And so David was so excited that the holy presence of God, the Ark of the Covenant, was coming back into where it rightfully belonged, so that the presence of the living God would dwell among them. And this is what happened in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 14. It says, wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and sounds of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, a daughter of Saul, watched from a window. When she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. Let's skip down to verse 20. So Michal is the one who is the wife of David. She is his wife, and that was given to her by Saul. And she didn't quite see it the same way that David did. And here's his response when he finds out. Verse 20, when David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls and his servants, as any vulgar fellow would. She's saying, your dancing is just... it's not actually an honor to God. It's disgusting. I can't believe you did that. It was a disgrace. You are a king. You should hold yourself in high regard. And this is what he says in verse 21. David said to Michal, it was before the Lord who chose me than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. And I will celebrate before the Lord, and I will become even more undignified than this. And I will be humiliated in my own eyes, but by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. David was not ashamed of his worship. He was not ashamed to come before the Lord in humility, to be looked at as something different than the man in charge, because God was the one in charge. And he wanted everybody to see, it's not about me. Yes, I'm the king. Yes, I'm the one that has been given authority over the people. But God is the one who is worthy of worship. And don't you ever think about worshiping me. And I'm going to do my best to always point you back to God, the one who is worthy of worship. And if that means being undignified and seeming foolish in the eyes of people, then I don't care. Because God is worthy of worship. David didn't stop there. He said, I'm the one in charge, I'm the king, and God will receive his worship. And even more than that, he said, I'm going to establish a ministry of singers and musicians to worship in the temple all year round. And they had a rotation where they would come and they would worship God. And he assigned people from different tribes a task. And their task was simply to worship, to prophesy, and to record these psalms that we read in these books. It talks about that in 1 Chronicles 25. It says, David, together with his commanders of the army, set apart some of the sons of Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun for the ministry of prophesying, accompanied by harps, lyres, and cymbals. Here's the list of men who performed this service. I won't list all the names, but it goes on and it talks about all the names of the people that were assigned to the ministry of worship in the kingdom of David. Isn't that incredible? Worship was so important that he took his valuable men and he said, this is an effort that we are going to do all year round to worship God and to give him glory. Later on in verse 6 of chapter 25, it says, all these men were under the supervision of their father, Asaph, for the music of the temple of the Lord, the cymbals, the lyres, and the harps of the ministry at the house of God. Asaph, Jeduthun, and Heman were under the supervision of the king. Along with their relatives, all of them trained and skilled in music for the Lord, numbered 288. Almost 300 people that were assigned specifically to the task of worship. This is how important it was to King David. He said, it's not enough that just I worship God. I need the kingdom to see that I value this. This is important. This is going to become a part of our culture. This is going to become a part of who we are as a people. We worship God. We worship God because God is worthy of worship. So as we try to understand the heart of David, what was the key? How did he have such a pure heart when it came to the worship of God? What was it about? It doesn't exactly tell us in the books that are about David, but Jesus gives us a little bit of an insight when he comes down to earth and he talks about worship. And Jesus comes and he meets this woman at the well, and he's talking to her about worship. She asks him, do we worship here? Do we worship there? And instead of responding to her question about where they're supposed to worship, he talks to her about the substance of worship. What does worship actually mean? What does it mean to have a heart of worship? These are the words of Jesus in John chapter 4, verse 23. He says to her, "Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth." In spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers that the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth. And this is what I want you to take away today. True worshipers worship God in spirit and in truth. In spirit and in truth. You look at the life of David, the way that he worshiped. He was full of the Spirit of the living God, and it flowed through him. And he didn't just worship God with his body because he was supposed to do this and do that and do this and do that. It was with his spirit. It was his full being and the Holy Spirit on him that he worshiped God with everything that he had. It says that he danced with all his might in those streets with his spirit. He worshiped God in spirit. But not only did he worship God in spirit, he worshiped God in truth. What does it mean to worship God in truth? It's not a show. Our worship is not a show. Our worship is for God. And when we worship, you have to ask yourself, is my worship true? Is my worship genuine? Am I doing this because I want to get something? Am I doing this because I want somebody to see me? Or am I worshiping God simply because he's worthy of worship? Spirit and truth. It just flowed out of David's heart. It came naturally. It was something that was found deep inside of him. Does anybody know how many Psalms that David wrote? There's 150 Psalms in the book of Psalms, but some of them were written by these people that were listed, Asaph and others. We don't know exactly. Some of them don't have who wrote them. But the ones that are attributed to David are up to 75. 75 songs. I'm a songwriter. I like to write songs. I like to lead worship, but I love to write songs. And I've written about 30 or 40 songs. I'm not even halfway to David. I've got a long way to go. And those are just the ones that are written down. An expression of his worship to God. And we get to read those now. That worship lives on and it inspires us and it compels us to worship. 75 different Psalms. David was a worshiper at heart. I want to move into a time of response, and we're going to do something a little different tonight. If Pastor Tim, if you could be ready. We want to read, as we close, this famous psalm that you have probably heard, and this was written by David, Psalm 23. It It says, a Psalm of David, verse 1, "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever."